And it's actually like a saying from there that like 100 steps backwards is worth 1,000 steps forwards.
Where did this entire thing come from? Knees over toes. Like we were taught, we've had you on the show before, but we were taught that, especially when you're squatting, as it pertains to like a heavy weight, it's really not a great idea, some people think, to not have your knee travel past your toe. So how did you start to come to some of these conclusions?
Well, if we trace it all the way back, okay, we know that in Asia, they've walked backwards for thousands of years. We know that much. And it's actually like a saying from there that like 100 steps backwards is worth 1,000 steps forwards. So it's like part of a Chinese saying. And it was simply passed down from generation to generation. So we don't know like exactly where that came from. But it was passed down from generation to generation. So we know that's been used for thousands of years. And that's a very low level of knees over toes training. And they found it to be very successful for preventing degenerative issues. Then exercise itself, when you start to look into the history, they're getting into the late 1800s. There was kind of movements almost like along the lines of gymnastics and stuff. It kind of like where the idea of, because at a certain point we weren't thinking about fitness. We were, out in the field working.
Movement, maybe
right.
Gymnastics / calisthenic type stuff.
So eventually there came like almost like a movement of the idea of like almost exercise. You know what I mean? Like mostly we're just getting ready for war, like prepare, like, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So there was war and farming. And so like most of us would have had to actually have a pretty physical lifestyle. Like, I don't think a farmer would have been like, now let me get my exercise in at the end of the day. Like they're done. They did their exercise. So there was a lot of, free body movement at that time. And it was mostly body weight based. Like there's even like, for example, there's a picture of a Nordic hamstring curl dating back to 1880.
Excuse me?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. My Nordic hamstring curl tutorial on YouTube, it starts by showing a picture of that. Like it was originally, and who knows how long they were using, but there's a picture of it in a book from 1880.
Shit.
Okay. So if you only have your own body, you end up working a lot of different areas. You're not really thinking about like, don't do this or don't do that. Mm-hmm. So as weights became popular and lifting weights, and like, for example, we can just look at it like in powerlifting. Has anyone ever set a record going rock bottom knees over toes? I don't think so. I've never seen, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So you're going to have to gravitate to do things to succeed at what you're trying to do. Mm. So for a powerlifter trying to train your squat, knees over toes, you're on a track that like, I don't think anyone's ever succeeded that way, Then for an Olympic weightlifter though, because you have to catch the bar, it's basically you explode the bar up, and now the lower you can drop, the more room you have to catch that bar.
See if you can bring up Shane Hammond's squat, 1,000-pound squat. There have been some powerlifters that kind of use that rock bottom thing, but like most of the time it's very, very rare. And even so, even when they do drop in those positions, a lot of times they're not, aggressively like shoving their knees over their toes. But I think for the most part, and we'll get to it in a minute, but let's watch this insane squat done by one of the all-time great American Olympic lifters, Shane Hammond.
Wow.
Yo, don't blink.
Wow.
But if you rewind it one more time,
very deep.
He smashes it. It's super deep. If you rewind it one more time, you'll kind of notice he does push the hips back, and it's a low bar squat. Mm-hmm. And so it still kind of falls in line with what you said. I mean, his knees travel forward. They're not traveling past the toes, though, just to kind of prove your point further. In that Olympic position, when he was down and doing snatches and things like that, his knees are... That's fucking crazy. His knees are definitely way over his toes.
Yeah. So those would be two different sports, and the knee angles would be very different. Mm-hmm. So you just kind of get into a situation in life where I just think it's a fundamental mistake if you say this is right and that's wrong, when people are clearly succeeding at two different things. Mm. So if your knee is going to be in life, say, going downstairs, and you are going to be doing a bunch of other training, and now you're not doing anything for your knees over your toes, then you might wind up, I've seen people like pretty strong people, but there's pain going down the stairs. So, okay, I wasn't in powerlifting, I was in basketball. Your knees are over your toes like every time you try to jump. Like, for example, like there's for like a 2-footed jump in the NFL, there's no such thing as a 40-inch vertical without knees over toes. It's never.
I want to add, there's no squat in there either. Like you're not trying to squat down to the floor.
Exactly.
That wouldn't make any sense.
I think we've almost, and look, this is at the end of a long day. You know, hopefully I don't like say something too wild, but like I think the more we've tried to, you have shirts that say like think less. I think we've thought ourselves to like a dumber level.
Oh,
where it's just like good, like you train for powerlifting, like that's fucking awesome. Like that's great. That's your sport. Like, and this is basketball and this is Olympic weightlifting. And so I'm just trying to create a system that would be used as accessory for any of those. You know what I mean? What I do in my training is not enough volume to have the muscle mass that both of you have. So anything I'm doing, you could add like to what you're doing. I do it so then I can play basketball without pain, heading toward a different life with my kid that I know I'm not just going to be doomed to be the dad on the sidelines. I can be there with him and be active, So I do think that the whole system of fitness does need a non-competitive system where the idea is just to help people do what they want to do without pain. So whether you're a powerlifter or Olympic weightlifter, if someone has a knee pain, I think they're going to enjoy the backward sled, for example. It's not like you should be telling them how they should do the lift. They should have an expert coach in that lift.
I don't know if you're aware of this, but you have a really amazing ability to connect the dots from starting backwards. So it's interesting that you talk often about walking backwards and backward sled dragging, because everything that you do and everything that you established is kind of backwards. The knees aren't supposed to go over the toes. Very dangerous. And you're like, well, maybe for some circumstances, the knees over toes isn't a great idea. Maybe in the case of you're lifting weights and you're doing a squat and you're squatting as much weight as possible.
That's already proven that it's not advantageous to be knees over toes. The powerlifting squat, the top powerlifters are lifting more weights. And so they're proving that if the goal is to lift the most weight, well then, it's right there on the tape what they're doing. You know what I mean?
If you want to have a more vibrant knee and you want to have a knee that has better longevity and has better joint and just health integrity in general, it sounds like it's a good idea to investigate shoving the knee over the toe.
Yeah, when you bend a joint all the way, you stimulate to the body to send synovial fluid to the area to bring nutrients to the area. Your body assumes you're using that joint. And I mean, if you just look across the amount of messages I get now on YouTube from places where, because a lot of people seem to be on YouTube in like all kinds of countries.
Yeah.
And places where the elderly, everyone, like you sit down in a deep squat, you know what I mean? But in America, like we have chairs, like you won't go to Starbucks and see people like down in a deep squat. And so many people there, they're older people. Sure, they're still going to have problems, but their older people are fascinated at like how broken down other older people are all over the world. So like, I'm sorry, but like a deep squat is like a natural human position. That doesn't mean the idea is to abuse that, but a full knee bend with the knee over toe, these are natural human positions, but it doesn't mean that you then try to change the form of a powerlifter squat, but it means that a powerlifter could identify which accessory exercises make them feel better.
You'll like this. This is said by Steve Jobs. You can't connect the dots moving forward. You can only connect the dots once you look back. And that's when everything will appear in the right sequencing to you. And you go, it must have been that way the whole time.
Yeah, you're right. And that's, I think my contributions are not forward advancements. They're backward advancements. The things like the reverse step-ups, they really can scale to any level. Yeah. It's just like a fundamental. So we're really just identifying, I don't really want to coach something unless it's like a natural human movement and then try to make that scalable. But it has to be said that the majority of people struggling in life that I've talked to about any issue that they're struggling with, they think that that success is a sort of instant gratification thing, that they're entitled, that just by saying I participated in blah, it should equal blah, oh, I did that business course, didn't work for me. Like that instant gratification, entitled type attitude would directly lead you to think no knees over toes ever. That's a hard position, so we're going to avoid it. But it's really like the things you're weakest at and worst at and stuff like that. That's where you have the room to grow. But of course, there's more short-term risk if you try to force into it. But long-term, you're shooting yourself in the foot long term if you take your weaknesses and then you avoid them. So it's very natural to see how no knees over toes could have spread in a sort of instant gratification, don't face our weaknesses, not long-term approach world.
The first thing is that, like you mentioned, honestly, all the stuff that you're doing that we were doing in the gym, any sport, any athlete in any sport can take this and benefit in their sport, from jiu-jitsu, basketball, powerlifting, whatever, grappling. Any sport can take any of this stuff, any of these movements, progress them slowly and progress with it. But, we had Joel Nsima on the podcast. And the cool thing is that when we were talking back and forth, because Joel has said, this is the ideal joint angle or the 90 degrees, the ideal joint angle, right? And when we were talking to him, it was cool to understand some of his concepts make a lot of sense. When you work with a lot of professional athletes, right, who need to get in and out, and maybe they need to work with heavy loads, maybe squatting all the way down with 500 pounds wouldn't be ideal, but maybe going to a 90-degree joint angle is. But he did mention something that we talked about. He mentioned how, if you go to those deep joint angles too often, it would lead to degradation, right? But that's only within the context of an athlete maybe trying to progress it too quickly. If we look at
too quickly, exactly.
If we look at your progressions, if you progress it with no pain, slowly over time, no athlete's going to get injured with that. Hey guys, you like cereal. I like cereal. Let's not eat the bad stuff, though. That's why we've partnered with Magic Spoon. Magic Spoon has #1 amazing macros: 0 grams of sugar, 4 grams of carbs, 14 grams of protein, and 140 calories per serving. You're not getting all the icky sugar that you get from normal cereal. Magic Spoon is the way to go. That's why we love it, and it fits our diet. Andrew, how can people get it?
Absolutely. You guys got to head over to magicspoon.com/powerproject. You guys will see the variety pack. That's 4 different flavors, and it's really an awesome way to kind of dip your toe into the cereal bowl. So that way you guys can figure out which flavor you like the most. And when you go there, you're actually going to receive $5 off that variety pack. Again, magicspoon.com/powerproject. Links to them down in the description. Let's get back to the video.
Life is supposed to be with challenges. Things can still happen, but we look at certain percentages out there in sports, and the 90-degree angle thing is actually, that's not new. That's actually how guys have been training in sports for a long time now. And so is 90-degree angle the optimal position or whatever? Well, maybe for strength, it might be the optimal position to be that our body is strongest in. Yeah. But now if we create an imbalance where now we're not stimulating certain parts. So I think the whole range of motion is important, meaning someone could criticize Joel for, working on the 90-degree angle, but how much stuff did we do today that was less than 90-degree angle?
Yeah.
Someone could laugh at me.
100 reps.
We did 100 reps
just
at
pulses.
15-degree angle.
Yeah.
That's less than 90-degree angle. But we also then did full bend. So, I mean, there's just no advantage to being weak in an area. And the 90-degree angle is probably the most overused section of strength. Think how we line up for a deadlift. Think how we get into a squat. So the 90-degree area is used a lot. And so most people have a lot of potential to really get new stimulation for the tendons and gradually build up stronger ligaments by working sort of the end ranges.
Can you explain that a little bit? Because we've had people where we've mentioned that and we've talked about that, but people don't understand why is it not just working the muscle? Why is it working the tendons and the ligaments and strengthening those over time? Because many people don't think that you can really strengthen those. They think that after they start to degrade, they're just going to get worse as you get older.
Yeah. So if we think about the Achilles is the biggest tendon in our body. And when we get into calf work where the knee is more bent now and the load is now on the Achilles, well, you now also end up with more load on that soleus muscle, that lower, deeper calf muscle. And I mean, there's a brilliant study from 2019. Well, I don't know if brilliant's the right word, but it makes it really clear that people weaker at extending that foot have more Achilles tendonitis and stuff. So, and not just at extending the foot, but then within weakness extending the foot in a bent knee rather than a straight-legged position. So when you now start to load that knee over toe and load the calf, now that weight is going into the Achilles, meaning there is load on our muscles, tendons, ligaments when we're doing just about anything. And if you now go into a much deeper position if if someone who had like tendonitis, they would feel the pain in those areas. You know, you reach, it's like someone with tendonitis, they reach the knee over toe, they're going to feel pain in that area. Now, if they sit back into like a 90-degree position, not letting the knee over toe, they might be able to keep the pressure more on the muscles. So there does simply have to be, like, when you go into these more quote unquote extreme sort of ranges, there's then more, your muscle can only go so far. And so there's more pull on the tendons and the ligaments. So it's just sort of a stimulus thing. You still feel the muscle, but you're now stimulating more into the tendons and the ligaments. But then we need to be strong in those areas to be protected. So someone could probably take, someone who, you know, has really deeply studied muscles, tendons, ligaments, could probably do some fantastic stuff to see, you know, which exercises work which things. But yeah, if you just sit back, you know, on a squat, you are going to be winding up using more muscle than if you just reach your knees forward and like, oh, my knee hurts there, right? Mm-hmm. So scaling those qualities, because in sport and life, we wind up in those positions. So we can build those up, and then the very tendon can develop and grow. And there's been some stuff, they didn't even have a name for it, but there's even like pictures in the study of people doing reverse step-ups, like exactly like we were coaching today. They didn't even have a name for it. It was just like step down off the box this way, you know what I mean? And now there's been like the Peterson step-up and the Poliquin step-up, and now they, yeah. And well, my name happens to be Patrick. It kind of works out. You got three. But the point is that they found that like the patellar tendon would actually regenerate and grow and strengthen. So it's almost like if you said, like, here's probably a simple way to think about like what would put pressure on your tendons or ligaments. Think about in your body, like what movements would hurt? You know what I mean? Yeah. Because when someone says, "Oh, my knee hurts," they're not talking about their quad muscles hurting. You know what I mean? They're usually talking about their quad tendon, their patellar tendon, or they had, oh, I had my MCL or my ACL or this or that. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's almost like you're thinking, what shit hurts your body? And then how do we scale that back to a level that doesn't hurt your body? And then we get stronger at that. I mean, that's really, if you just scratched everything I rambled about for the last 5 minutes and took that statement, that would almost be a simple way of thinking about it. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like what would hurt your joints? Like what would hurt your shoulder, your elbow, your this, your that? And then how do we scale that down to a level that doesn't hurt and then train it? And that's actually, a lot of physical therapists really understand that concept. So actually quite a few of the people here today who were, you know, we're so appreciative of this stuff are physical therapists, because they duplicate this data and they're using it. They're using ATG with like amazing results with their patients because they understand how to apply it. So ATG doesn't work or not work. Everything we do out there can work or could not work depending on how it's applied. Mm-hmm. And that's probably the simplest way to explain it. Is like we're taking the things that hurt and then finding the level that doesn't.
I think.
Hey, little mama, let me whisper in your ear. Like, comment, subscribe to the channel, because we continue to bring you peak content on this channel. Obviously, you guys are here. You guys have watched the whole video. So like, comment, subscribe. All right. See you later.